So we started discussing options from the last lecture. First, remember that for options we have two kinds of options. We have call options, and if you have a call, then you have the right to buy something at a certain price before a certain date. Here, the certain price refers to the exercise price. The certain date refers to the expiration date. So essentially, call option means if you have a call option on Apple, it means you have the right to buy Apple stock at the exercise price before the expiration date. And then we have the put option, which means if you have the put option, then you have the right to sell Apple stock at the exercise price before the expiration date. And then we started talking about the payoffs of options. So we first discussed the payoff to a call option. So let's see. So here we have a call option with a exercise price of $20. Of course, the textbook uses strike price, but strike price is the same thing as the exercise price. So you can see that if the exercise price is $20, then if the stock price is higher than $20, then the call option buyer will be happy to exercise this call option, because by exercising the call option, the option buyer can sell the stock. The option buyer can buy the stock at $20. So you can see that if the stock price is 30, then the option buyer's payoff is 30 minus 20, right? So essentially it is this line here. And then if stock price is 10, you can imagine that now the option buyer will not want to exercise her call option, because by exercising the call option, it means the call buyer will be able to buy the stock at $20. However, the market price is $10. So there's no need to exercise the call to buy the stock. It is better to directly buy from the market at $10. And this basically implies the payoff of this call option is just zero, because you will not exercise it, because you will let this call option just expire. So this example basically tells you, right, if stock price is larger than exercise price, then the payoff is stock price minus the exercise price, right? So essentially, this is the stock price, this is the exercise price. And if stock price is smaller than exercise price, then you will not exercise the call, so the payoff from the call option is just zero. All right. Again, here S represents stock price, K represents strike price. Okay. So that's why we have a formula like this, right? So specifically, we So specifically, we just mentioned this part. And I said in the last lecture, you really don't need to remember this compact form. Okay, what about a put option? So think about this. Now let's say we have a put. In this case, you can see that if stock price is larger than K, this implies that the put option buyer will not want to exercise the put, right? Because what is put? The put basically means you have the right to sell the stock at the exercise price K. However, the market price is actually higher, right? So it's better for you to sell your stock at the market price. This implies because you don't want to exercise your put, the payoff of your put is just 0. And then if the stock price is lower, now you will want to exercise your put, because by exercising it, you will be able to sell your share at a higher price, that is the exercise price K. So in this case, you can see that K is your selling price and the market price is given by S. So your payoff would be K minus S, right? Okay. So that's why we have this part. Okay, now let's see a example here. You own a put option on Annex or Onex Corp. So this call, it's actually a put. So this put has an exercise price of 20. Plot the value of this option as a function of the stock price. Okay. So we will draw a picture which is similar to this one here. And you can see that you wanted to put the payoff on the vertical axis and the stock price on the horizontal axis. So here we have the stock price. And then we have the payoff here. So to think about the payoff, we first pick several different stock price, right? So let's say if the stock price is just 10, what is your payoff? Well, if the stock price is 10, you will want to exercise your put, because this means you can sell your stock at $20. Remember, $20 is the exercise price. And the market price is 10. So this implies your payoff would be 20 minus 10. So we have 1 point. Now let's say if the stock price is 0, again you will want to exercise your put, and your payoff would be 20 minus 0. Sorry. Oh yes, it's 20 minus 0. Now here we get a different point. Now what about the cutoff case? So if the stock price is 20, well, you will be indifferent, right? Because if you do not exercise, you get a payoff of 0. If you actually exercise it, the payoff is still 0. So we get the third point. And we pick a even higher stock price, $30. Now you will not want to exercise your put because the market price is 30, right? It's better for you to sell your shares at the market price. So the payoff of your put would be 0. So this essentially means the payoff from your put option is given by this kink line, right? So essentially you're combining a downward sloping line with this horizontal line, and you have a kink at this $20 stock price. Okay. Okay. That's pretty weird. I think I have talked about at the money or out of the money. Oh, I did. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah. So, if you're taking a long position in the options contract, then we could talk about moneyness. there are three cases: at the money, in the money, out of the money. These definitions are not super related to corporate finance. However, if you read financial news, often people will use these three kinds of terminologies. A option is at the money if the exercise price equals the market price of the stock. And a option is in the money if the payoff is positive if you exercise it. So you can see that if you have a call option, then if the market price is larger than the exercise price, then it is in the money, right? For example, if the strike price is 10 and the current stock price is 20, then it means if you immediately exercise your call, you will be able to buy your stock at $10. So this means your payoff would be 20 minus 10, which is 10. So in this case, you can see that your call option is in the money. Now, what about put option? Obviously, put option will be the opposite, right? So if strike price is larger than the current stock price, then the put option is in the money. So, for example, if the strike price is 20 and the current stock price is 5, this implies if you exercise your put, then you will sell your stock at $20, and then your payoff would be 20 minus 5, which equals 15. So it's a positive number, right? So your put option is in the money. And then you will have the opposite case, that is out of the money. So an option is out of the money if its value is negative if you exercise it. And you can see that for a call option, right, we have discussed this. If the stock price is larger than the strike price, then it is in the money. This basically implies for a call option, if the current stock price is smaller than the strike price, then it is out of the money, right? So you basically just reverse these inequality signs. And you can see that this is indeed the case, right? So just write down some random numbers, right? So if the strike price is 15 and the current stock price is 8, this implies that if you exercise this call, then you will buy the stock at $15, which is $7 higher than the market price. So essentially, it means your payoff is -7, right? So this is a out of the money call option. Okay, of course, for the put option, if the strike price is smaller than the current market price, then this put option is out of the money. So we talk about the payoff of the option contracts, but note that we actually only discussed the payoff of an option buyer. So we essentially only discussed what is your payoff if you take a long position in the options contract. So now we proceed to find out what is the profit of a short position. That is, now we discuss what is the option writer's profit. So to understand a option writer's profit, it's actually pretty helpful for us to understand a option buyer's profit. The reason is because a option contract is essentially a zero-sum game. So the gain to the buyer comes from the loss of the seller. Similarly, the gain of the seller comes from the loss of the buyer. So essentially, it means the payoff to the seller is the negative of the payoff to the buyer, right? Similarly, the payoff to the buyer is the negative of the payoff to the seller. So first, let's see why this is a zero-sum game. Let's say you sell a call option with a strike price of 20. You can see that in this case, we're discussing a option seller here. Let's say the stock price is $25. And this is a call option. And the market price is larger than the strike price. This implies the option buyer will want to exercise her option. You can see that if the buyer exercises her option, the buyer will get a profit, which is 25 minus 20, right? Okay. Now, what about the seller? As the seller, you will have the obligation to sell the stock to the option buyer for $20. However, the market price is actually 25. So this implies your loss would be 20 minus 25, which is minus 5. Right? So you can see that the payoff, right, to the seller is the negative of the payoff to the buyer, right? Or you could say the payoff to the buyer plus the payoff to the seller has to be 0, right? So this basically implies it's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game. Okay, so now let's see an example. How to calculate a option seller's profit. So we have seen this picture before, right? So this is basically the payoff of a call option. To be more specific, it's the payoff of a call option to a option buyer, right? Now, how do you find out the payoff of the payoff of this call option to a option seller? We learned the payoff to the seller is the negative to the payoff of the buyer. So this implies this kinked red line will give you the seller's payoff, right? Essentially, you can see that if the buyer's gain is 10, then the seller's loss would be minus 10, right? So similarly here, the buyer's gain is 30, then seller's loss would be minus 30. So essentially, from a graphical point of view, the picture of the seller's profit is just the mirror image of the picture of the buyer's profit. Right? Okay. Let's see an example here. So you are taking a short position Bombardier stock with the exercise price of 20 that expires today. What is your profit at expiration as a function of the stock price? So we could basically take two approaches to think about this problem. First, we could start from the long position on this put, and then we will find out the mirror image of this long position payoff. So we will get the image of the short positions payoff. Or we could just directly, right? We could just directly find out this short positions payoff. Okay. So now let's start with the long position. So we would first start with a long position. Well, we learned about how to find out the payoff of a long position, right? So it will look like this. Okay, let me use a different color. Ah, boy. Ah. Okay. So it's sorry for that. So this is the payoff, right? This is a payoff to a long position. And you also have 20 here. Now, how do you find out the payoff to the short position in this put option? As I said, you would just flip this picture, right? You will find out the mirror image. Okay, I have to extend the vertical axis. So if you flip this image along the horizontal axis, you will get the seller's profit. So in this, what's the color's name? Violet, I guess. Violet. No, violet. Purple, right? It's purple. So I guess it's this color. Okay, great. Now, what about the second method? Well, think about this. If you wanted to use this second method, you have to directly find out what is this put option seller's payoff, right? So basically, you will examine a different market price. So think about this, right? If the market price is 10, then you can imagine that the put option buyer will want to exercise the put option. And the put option buyer will get a payoff of 20 minus 10, right? So this implies, as the option seller, you will have to suffer a loss of minus 10. So we would have a point like this. And then if the price is 20, in this case, you can see that the option buyer will be indifferent. And as a option seller, you will also be indifferent from whether your option buyer will want to exercise or not. So in this case, that you can see that your payoff is just a 0. And what about a higher number, right? If the market price is 30, obviously the option buyer will not want to exercise her put option, because by exercising it, it means the buyer of the option will have to sell the share at the exercise price, which is 20. It is smaller than the $30 market price. So as the option seller, you're safe, right? You know the other party will not want to exercise. So your payoff is just a 0. And then in the extreme case, if the market price drops to 0, it means the buyer of the put option will be very happy, because the buyer exercises her put option. She sells the Bombardier stock to you at the exercise price, which is $20, but the market price is only 0. So the buyer will get a profit of $20. As a seller, you have a loss of minus $20. So you can see that this is your this is the curve for the option seller's payoff. I have to say, sometimes it's a little confusing to think about payoffs. So just take some time, practice, right? Understand how this works, and you will be able to figure out how to calculate payoffs of both call options and put options for both buyer and seller. Okay, now let's discuss the application in corporate finance. As I said, discussing options never so we never had the goal to use options to understand investment or to do some speculation. So our goal was always about corporate finance. So here we try to understand the firm's equity and debt as options. So we want to provide a novel view to think about a firm's capital structure. So the first view is about how to think about a firm's equity. So I will just first state the result, and then I will explain why this is true. So basically, we can consider firm's equity as a call option. And we can consider a firm's risky debt as an option portfolio. So there are two cases. First, we can consider the firm's option. We can consider the firm's debt as a portfolio of firm's asset plus a short position in call option on the firm's asset. So basically, in this case, you can see that the option portfolio contains two investments. The first one is the investment in the firm's asset. So it's a long position in the firm's asset. And the second investment is the short position in call option on the firm's asset. So here, this call option here is a little different from the call option we just discussed, because until now, when we discussed call option or put option, these options are always written on a firm's stocks. But now, the call option is written on firm's asset. And then the second view about debt as an option portfolio is we can consider debt as a portfolio of risk-free bond and a short position in put option on the firm's asset. So here again we have two investments, right? So we have one risk-free bond, and we also have a short position in put option. And this put option is not written on firm's stocks. This put option is written on the firm's asset. Okay, now let's go into more details. First, equity as a call option. Since we're talking about call option, right? Think about the simple option we discussed before. A stock option. To be more specific, let's talk about a call option. Now, when you're thinking about call option, you have several basic elements, right? So first, you have to think about the underlying asset. And you have to think about the exercise price. And you have to think about the expiration date, right? These are like the basic elements. For example, if you're looking at a stock option, this option is called, let's say it's 2020, December 115, and it is on Apple. So you can see that the underlying asset here is Apple stock. So it's Apple stock. And then you can see that the exercise price is 115, right? And then you can see that the expiration date here is 2020, December. To be more specific, it should be the third Friday of the December of 2020. Now, this is like the conventional simple call option we have discussed before. Now we think equity as a call option on firm's asset. So let's look at this weird guy, right? Call option on firm's asset. Now, what are the three elements? Right, so again, we have to think about the underlying asset and the exercise price and the expiration date. Now, the underlying asset is actually the firm's asset, right? And what is the exercise price? Well, it's the required debt payment. So this is essentially a levered firm with debt. For example, if the firm has a debt payment of $1 billion due in 1 year, then you can see that for this firm, this call option would have a exercise price of $1 billion. And then expiration date. Expiration date is the maturity date of the debt, right? So now let me give you some very simple example. So let's say Apple has a debt of 100 million due on let's say January 31, 2021, right? So in this case, you can see that we can consider Apple's equity as a call option on Apple's asset. Now, in this case, what are the three elements? Well, the underlying asset would be Apple's asset. The required debt payment would be the exercise price. So the exercise price would be this guy, $100 million, right? And the expiration date would be the maturity date of the debt. So it should be January 31, 2021. Again, we are talking about, we can consider, Apple's equity as a call option. Okay, this is basically how do you construct this call option. But now let's see why this is true, right? Why this holds. Now let's imagine that there's a firm. Let's say this firm has a debt of $100 million. No, it's just $100. So let's imagine there's a debt. Let's imagine there's a firm. And this firm has a debt payment of $100. Let's assume this $100 will be due in 1 year, right? Now think about this. Let's think about the value of the equity, right? So we basically can think about several different cases, right? So let's say the value of equity is given by E. Value of equity is given by E. Let's say the value of the firm's asset is given by V, right? And we know that the required debt is $100. So let's think, what is the value of the equity, right? So that's our question here. Now, first case, if V is smaller than 100, that is, if the firm's value is smaller than 100, what will happen? Well, this firm will have to declare bankruptcy, right? Because it cannot repay its debt. Its value is smaller than its debt. So in this case, equity will be 0, right? And now, if V is larger than 100, in this case, what is the value of equity? Well, it's easy, right? So the firm will have to first repay the debt, and then the residual value will belong to equity holders. So the value of equity would be the value of the firm's asset minus the required debt payment. So if you draw a picture like this, if you draw a picture of the value of equity, you will see that if firm's asset is smaller than 100, right, the value of equity will be 0. And then if the firm's value is larger than 100, then the value of equity will be given by this upward sloping line. What can you see here? You can see that the payoff, the payoff of a call option has the same picture as the value of equity, right? Can you see the similarity here? So this is the payoff of a call. And this is the value of the equity. So you can see that value of the equity has the same picture as the payoff from a call option. So this gives you the hint that you can actually consider firm's equity as a call option, right? But as I said, if you're discussing the option, you have to think about several elements, right? First, you can see that if you consider the call option as, if you consider the firm's equity as a call option, then you should consider that this call option is based on the firm's asset. That is, the underlying asset of the call option is the firm's asset. Next, what is the strike price? Well, if you look at our calculation here, you can see that 100 is exactly the strike price, right? Remember that when we discussed the picture of the call option, we discussed this kink here. The kink here is exactly the strike price, right? So if you consider the equity as a call option, then the required debt payment should be the strike price. Or you could look at the formula. So we discussed before, the formula for calculating the payoff of a call option is given by either 0 or S minus K. So this guy here is the exercise price, right? And you can see that we're exactly getting the same sort of formula here, right? So this guy is our strike price, right? Okay. What is the what is the expiration date of this call option? Well, you can see that it's the same as the maturity date of the debt, right? So that's why you can consider a firm's equity as a call. The reason is because we find out the payoff of a call option is the same as the value of the firm's equity. So based on this, we can consider the firm's equity as a call option, and this call option is based on the firm's asset, and this call, its expiration date is the same as the maturity date of the debt, and this call's exercise price is equal to the required debt payment, right? Okay, now let's discuss risky debt. So you might wonder this. If we consider a firm's equity as a call option, to be more specific, a firm's equity essentially is the same as a long position in the call option. Now you might wonder, if equity holders are the call option buyers, then who are the call option sellers, right? Again, the question is like this. In this picture, we learned equity can be considered as a call option. So this essentially means shareholders, they are option buyers. And we understand for any option contract, we have two parties. So if shareholders are the option buyers, who are the option sellers? Well, in fact, the interesting result is debt holders are actually the option sellers. So first, let me state the result here. Debt holders, they can be considered as a call option seller. So they sell a call option. Again, we have to think about several elements. This call option is based on the firm's asset, and this call option's strike price is equal to the required debt payment, and this call option's expiration date is the same as the debt maturity date, right? Obviously, you can see that we have discussed this call option, right? Now, if debt holders are call option sellers, how can we consider debt in the context of options? Well, risky debt can be actually considered as an option portfolio. This portfolio has two positions. First, a short position on the call option. Second, a long position in the firm's asset. So mathematically, this means a firm's risky debt equals firm's asset minus call option on firm's asset. Why do we have this minus here? Well, the reason is because we just discussed risky debt can be considered as a portfolio of firm's asset and a short position on the call. A short position on the call basically means you should have a minus sign before this call option, right? Because if this is the call, then it means you're taking a long position. And we put a minus sign before the call, now you're taking a short position. Okay, now, why this is the case? Again, let's think about payoffs, right? So you can see that we have to make sure that the payoff to this option portfolio is the same as the debt. So if the option portfolio has the same payoff as the debt, then this implies we can consider debt as a option portfolio. Okay, so first let's think about the payoff of the debt. Okay, I have to say this picture is pretty confusing. So let me draw some separate pictures. Okay, I'll use the space here. Okay, let's consider the simple case. The firm has the debt, and the debt has a face value of $100. So $100 is the required debt payment. Now think about, okay, again we have the payoff. And then the horizontal axis is the value of the firm's asset. So let me follow the textbook. So it's called firm asset value. Now think about this. If the firm's asset value is below $100, this implies the firm declares bankruptcy, right? For example, if the firm's value is $50, in this case, you can imagine that the firm declares bankruptcy. So the firm's asset will belong to debt holders. So debt holders' payoff is basically $50. Now, let's say if the firm's value is $100, then you can see that, let's assume the firm will pay back its debt. And then you can see that the firm will be able to pay back its debt of $100. So debt holders will get $100. Now let's say if the firm's value is, let's say it's $200. Again, the firm can pay back its debt. So debt holders will get back its $100. Now let's think about this. In the extreme case, the firm's value drops to zero. Again, the firm files for bankruptcy, and debt holders cannot recoup anything, right? So in this case, debt holders will have a payoff of zero. So now we connect these dots. So you can see that the payoff to risky debt, again, is a kink line, right? And the kink happens at the required debt payment. Now we wanted to prove that the payoff of the debt is the same as the value of this option portfolio. Remember, what is our option portfolio? Well, our option portfolio has a short position on the call and a long position on the firm's asset. So we have to combine payoffs to these two kinds of investments, right? We have to combine payoff on the short position of the call and on the long position of the firm's asset. Okay, now let's examine. The value of the portfolio. Okay, our portfolio has two positions. Let's say this is our portfolio. So we have two positions. The first is a short position on call and a long position on firm's asset. Okay, let's think about the value of the firm's asset. Oh, this is easy, right? Because the horizontal axis discuss firm's asset value. The vertical axis also gives us the firm's asset value. It basically means if I want to draw out a line for the firm's asset value, then it has to be a 45-degree line. Right? Let me use a different color. So it has to be 45-degree line. Okay, now we have done this. Now what about the value on the short position of a call? Now think about this, right? If the firm's, okay, maybe it's better for me to write down this $100 here. Now, think about this. If the firm's value is $200, right? Let's say this is 200. What will happen to the call option? Well, it means that the option buyer, right, will want to exercise the call. The reason is because the exercise price is only 100 and the value of the firm is 200. So if the call option buyer exercises the call, then the buyer can actually earn a profit of $100, right? So this essentially means as this essentially means if you have a short position in a call option, you will have to suffer a loss of $100, right? So basically we have a dot here. Now, let's think about this. If the firm's asset value is 100, then you can see that in this case, the option buyer is indifferent from exercising the call, right? In this case, you can imagine that the call option seller's profit is just 0. So we have a dot like this. That is, if you have a short position in the call, your payoff is just 0. And then let's say if the price is 50, if the firm's asset value is 50, you can see that the call option buyer will not want to exercise the call, because by exercising the call option buyer will only be able to buy the firm at a price of 100. However, the firm's actual value is 50. So the call option will just expire worthlessly. This implies as a option seller, as the guy who takes a short position in the call option, you're safe. So your payoff is just 0. This basically means the payoff to the short position on the call option is given by this blue kinked line, right? Now we have to think about the value of the portfolio. That is, we have to combine these two lines, right? So you can see that if price is smaller than 100, then clearly by combining these two lines, we will have a line look like this, right? Now, if price is larger than 100, we will have to combine this portion and this portion, right? And you combine these two portions, you will get a flat line. So the line will just look like this. So what you can see here is the value of the portfolio has the same payoff as the value of the debt. So this tells us, right, risky debt equals risk-free debt. So this tells us risky debt is the same as the portfolio of firm's asset and a short position on the call option, right? I know this must seem a little bit complicated, but remember the main methodology here. We're trying to find out debt can be constructed as an option portfolio. Now, how do we do this? we have to find out debt or the payoff of the debt is the same as the value of the portfolio. We always use this methodology. So if these two things are the same, then we could say debt can be considered as a option portfolio. Okay, now let's look at this second view about the debt. So let me first remove these things. So debt holder can also be considered as a put option seller. So here we're dealing with a put option, and this put option is based on the firm's asset, and the strike price again is the same as the required debt payment, and then the expiration date is equal to the maturity date. Given this, we can consider debt as the option portfolio. So debt can be considered as an option portfolio. And this option portfolio contains two positions. The first is a short position on this put option. That is the put option we just mentioned here. And the second is a riskless bond. So the result is a risky debt can be considered as a combination of risk-free debt and a short position in the put option on firm's asset. Again, we want to prove this is indeed the case. What is the methodology? Well, we want to show that the payoff of the risky debt is the same as the value of this option portfolio. So let me use the old trick, right? So I will basically draw out the value of the portfolio. So remember now, our portfolio contains two positions, right? So a short position in the put and a long position in the bond. And here it's a different bond compared with the firm's debt. It's a riskless bond. Okay, now let's think about payoffs. Again, we have value on the vertical axis, and we have firm's asset value on the horizontal axis. And then we have this 100 here, which is the required debt payment. Now let's examine the payoff from these two positions. So let's first look at the payoff of the risk-free bond. So this risk-free bond has a face value of $100. Right? It's riskless. This basically means the payoff to this riskless bond is always $100. So, right, I would draw a horizontal line here. This is the payoff to the riskless bond. Now let's think about the position. Let's think about the payoff to a short position in this put option. Well, we actually did some exercise before, right? How to find out the picture of this put option. So let's see, how could we draw this picture here? Okay, great. Now, let's say if the firm's value is 100. Now you can see that in this case, the put option holder may not want to exercise his put. So in this case, if you have a short position in the put option, your payoff is just 0. So we have a dot here. Now let's say the firm's value is actually 200. Now what will happen? Well, you can see that in this case, if the firm's value is 200, the put option holder will not want to exercise her put option because the put option has an exercise of 100. If she exercises it, then she will have to sell the firm at a price of 100. But the value of the firm is actually 200, right? So in this case, you can see that as a put option seller, your payoff is also 0. Now let's look at the price of 50. So if it is 50, you can see that, well, in this case, right, the put option buyer will want to exercise the put option because with the exercise price of 50, exercising the put option will give the put option buyer a profit, a payoff of $50. Right? Then you're the seller, so you have to suffer a loss of $50. So it's here. And you could also examine that if the firm's value drops to 0, still the option buyer will be able to sell the firm to you for $100. However, the actual value is 0, so as a seller, you suffer a loss of 100. So we have a dot here. Now, connecting these dots, we have the value of this put option, right? Now, again, we will combine these two lines, right? So what you can see here is, again, we have two parts, right? So whenever the firm's value is larger than 100, then combining the green curve and blue curve gives you a line like this, right? And then if the firm's asset value is below 100, combining the green curve and the blue curve will give you a line like this, right? Again, you can see that magically, the payoff of the risky debt is the same as the value of this option portfolio, right? So that's why we can say risky debt equals risk-free debt minus put option on firm's assets. So basically, you can see that we have two kinds of option portfolios to replicate the payoff of the risky debt, right? So we could either use firm's assets minus call option on firm's assets, or risk-free debt minus put option on firm's assets. We're getting this result because there is this so-called put call parity. So essentially, these two kinds of constructions are the same, but yeah, we have not learned about put call parity. So I will not discuss too much on that, but I just want you to know that there are two ways to construct option portfolios to represent a firm's risky debt. And then the underlying methodology is essentially the same. We just want to make sure the payoff of the debt is the same as the value of the option portfolio. Okay. Okay, great. That's weird. Why do I have this here? Okay, last, let's talk about CDS. If you look at this formula here, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so if you look at this formula, on the surface, right, it tells you risky debt can be replicated by a risk-free debt minus put option on firm's assets. But if you rearrange terms of this equation, you can find out you can find out risk-free debt equals risky debt plus put option on firm's assets, right? So basically what you can see here is you can magically convert a risky debt to risky-free debt, right? So how do you convert a risky debt to risk-free debt? Well, the word convert here is not super accurate. What you essentially need to do is, if you have a risky debt, then you will have to buy a put option, right? So if you combine the risky debt with a put option on the firm's asset, then you will have a risk-free debt. Essentially, you can see that here this put option on the firm's asset serves as insurance, right? That is, if the firm does not default, then you will get back your face value. If the firm actually defaults, then the put option on this firm's asset, this insurer, will actually pay back your loss. So this is the idea of CDS, that is credit default swap. So basically, if you want to insure against default risk, you can use CDS. Let's say you have a risky bond. You can just basically find out a CDS dealer and pay the dealer some premium, and this dealer will sell you the CDS, which is essentially a insurance contract. It says that if your bond defaults, then the dealer of the CDS, that is the party which sells you the CDS, will make up the loss. Okay. We have a. Okay, I guess I will stop here today because we actually have covered a lot of content in this semester.